Hi friends, it's Chari. Today I am creating a beautiful floral birthday card and I'm using the new Beautiful Blossoms backdrop to do that. So here is that Beautiful Blossoms backdrop in landscape and I am going to start by cutting this out of some green watercolor wishes paper. I also cut that extra stem that comes in this die set and I'm going to be using some different flowers. So I'm using that daisy shaped flower that comes with the die. But I want to make a nice garden, so I'm using the Terrific Tulips Tulip and the Darling Daffodils Daffodil. And I've already cut out all of my flower pieces, and I'm going to add some shading with some marker. So for these daisies, which I know they're probably not daisies because they're purple, but these are cut from some lilac cardstock, and I'm just using some comparable shades of purple in my Olo marker to add some shading on those petals. I'm not worrying about the center because I'm going to cover that up with a center. So here are the two centers. These are cut from sunflower cardstock. And I am going to go ahead and glue these to the center of the flowers because I think that's going to make it easier to hold them while I add some shading to the centers. And again, I'm just picking some yellowy oranges that go well with that cardstock. For that darker shade, I'm just adding some little dots so it has some texture that matches the die cut as well. Now for my tulip, I cut this from some Ballet Slippers cardstock. And I've turned it around so I am pulling my marker up from the bottom of those petals, but it's just easier for me to pull down. And I'm using two shades of pink. And I actually like that you can see those marker strokes. It makes it look to me more like a watercolored look. I don't want to blend it out to where it's completely solid in color. I will go ahead and put this little tulip together. So I'm adding some glue at the bottom of that big petal that goes in the middle. And then I will just layer the other two on top. And this is going to go on that flower stem that's over here on the left. Now for my daffodil, I have my two die cuts of the petals. I die cut these from some yellow spiffy speckles paper. It is just the perfect yellow to me, that buttery yellow. And I didn't think that I got the same color with any of my cardstocks. So I love that we can use those spiffy speckles as a base as well. And again, I'm doing the same thing as before with two shades of yellow and adding some shading at the center of those petals. Once I have these shaded, I can stack them together to create my flower, and I will just do that by adding a little dot of glue right at that circle in the center where they overlap. Now the daffodil has some other parts to it. For this centerpiece, I cut that from sunflower cardstock and I am adding some shading. I'm actually going to add a little bit of detail to the outside edge of this piece, but you're going to see that here in a little bit when I start to assemble. For these centerpieces here, I used some fake tan cardstock and I'm just adding a little dot of glue right in the middle. I'm going to use my pick up pokey tool to drop those in place. And when I add the second layer, I'm going to turn it so that we have lots of little pieces here in the center. I'm going around with a marker and just touching those little edges so that they have a different color. And then I will add the centerpiece out of Guava Cardstock. And I'm adding a few little dots of marker to that as well. I just couldn't leave anything untouched. Now when I lay this on to my daffodil petals, I thought it blended it a little bit too much. I wanted to see the edge of the centerpiece. So what I'm going to do is take a darker orange marker and just lightly go around the edges of that. So you know when you see those daffodils where the edge of that centerpiece is like a bright orange color, that's kind of the look I'm going for with this one, but it's going to make that centerpiece really stand out on this flower. Then I can add a little bit of liquid glue all around and put that right in the center. So now all of my flowers are done and I need to work on my background. Now if you're catching this right here, I cut that to 5 1/4, which was a 1/4 inch too short. but we can still use this piece of spiffy speckles paper for our background because we have the frame of our backdrop that's going to cover up those parts that are white on the sides. So I'm just adding liquid glue all over my backdrop piece that was cut from that green Watercolor Wishes paper. And I will just drop that in place, covering up my little mistake with my spiffy speckles paper. Now before I start adding all my pieces, I want to add my birthday sentiment. I'm using this happy birthday stamp from the All the Party Hats stamp set. I just really like the font on this one because it's nice and bold. And I am going to stamp this using my MISTI so it's nice and straight and I don't mess up my background that I've created. And now that my sentiment is on there, I am ready to finish assembling my card. I did cut a stitch rectangular frame from vanilla malt cardstock, and I'm just going to add that with a little bit of liquid glue. This is going to frame it up nicely, and I love the look that this gives with the little flowers. They look like they're peeking out from a frame. Now I forgot to add my extra stem, which I meant to tuck behind the leaves, but since that's already glued down, I'm just going to pull up that frame before it dries and we're going to tuck it behind the frame instead. So I'm just pulling that up carefully before that glue dries and I'm going to get my placement. I want to make sure it doesn't cover up my other daisy that's going to go there, so I'm just kind of checking that. And I'll tuck that behind that cream frame. Then I can add my other flower. I'm going to make sure that frame's nice and stuck down. And then I can just trim off that stem that's sticking out underneath the frame. Now to add my tulip. Now if I added this right on the end of the stem, it would be super high. But the nice thing about this, since it's nice and flat on my card, is I can kind of adjust how tall these stems are with the flowers, especially with this daffodil here, because it is very large. So I need it to kind of come way down and overlap the leaves a little bit. Now I thought it was a little bare right in there in the center, so I cut a butterfly from the Magic Iris Butterfly Wreath add-on. So I cut one solid and one of the outlines. The solid piece is from Peach Cardstock and the outline is from Narwhal Cardstock, and I'm adding a little bit of shading to the peach. Then I will layer the two pieces together to create my little butterfly. And I'm just going to do that with a dot of glue in the center because I want the two layers of wings to be independent of each other. I'm going to kind of bend them up here. I'm actually going to grab my tweezers because they were kind of shifting around to hold that center where that glue is while I bend up the wings and give it some nice dimension. Then I can add this to my card. I'm just kind of deciding which way I want this butterfly to fly. And I think this direction is going to look the best. Now I am adding stickles, although I wasn't quite done. I thought I was done, but I'll talk about that here in a minute. I'm just adding some glitter details to all the flowers. So the center of the daisies, the center of the daffodil, some on the butterfly wings, and then on the tulip petals. But what was bothering me about this card was a couple things. The leaves looked a little too plain, even though it was that Watercolor Wishes paper. So I'm carefully adding some shading with my green marker, which if I was redoing this, I obviously would do this before I glued that frame on. So you just want to be really careful to not get any of that green on the frame or the flowers. Other thing that bothered me about this card was that daffodil overlapping the frame on the right, which I love, but it fell off balance. So what I did was I cut one of the individual leaves from the Big Blossoms backdrop. I am adding that shading just like I did on the rest of the Watercolor Wishes leaves. And then I'm going to layer this over here so I have something peeking out over the frame on the left side too, and give this card some more balance that actually made me much happier once I did that. So I will just add a little bit of liquid glue right there and layer this right on top of the leaf that's already there. and that feels much more balanced to me. And here is my finished garden birthday card with all those beautiful die cut flowers, and I just think it's so pretty. I like that we can use this big blossom backdrop to use some of the other flowers in our collection. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.